Welcome back to this episode of the Customer Discovercast. This is season 2, episode 3 of the Y Combinator Series. I am here with Elizabeth Adams, who is the founder and chief clinical officer of HelloEllo.com. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I
It's an
appreciate
honor.
it.
Yeah, tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
My name's Elizabeth, and I'm the Chief Clinical Officer of Ello, as you said. And Ello is a company that focuses on early childhood development using technology. And our first product is Ello, and Ello is a reading application for kids, the first of its kind that uses real books and speech recognition technology. So kids who are in the early stages of reading development can use real books to read to Ello, and Ello encourages them, motivates them using behavioral psychology and motivation. And the tech piece is that we use speech recognition technology to help kids when they get stuck when they're reading, and to give them feedback and coaching so they can develop their reading skills.
Wow,
Really
that was
excited about
very clearly and concisely spoken. I would take a public speaking classes from you as well. That's
it.
impressive. So, really talk about okay, so you have a very dense educational background. Speak about that, and then talk about how you went from, being in the education space to really
Uh-huh.
saying, you know what, I'm going to be a startup founder.
Yeah. So, it always feels a little bit funny for me to speak about my experience with YC, because in so many ways I feel like I am not the typical startup founder, and it is not my background. I am, I'm old for a startup founder. I'm a female. I'm a mom. These are not like normal norms around what people sometimes think of, which in some ways I think is great because we're shifting the idea of what a startup founder is. But sometimes it's still surprising for me to talk about being in this space because it still feels relatively new compared to the trajectory of my career. So I am a clinical psychologist by training, a child psychologist, and I worked in a very traditional setting as a psychologist. I was in hospitals, and then I had my first child, my daughter, and I wanted to get out of hospitals, and I started working in schools, and I worked a lot with parents and focused on child development, and that was always my passion. And I was at a school for a long time and was sort of interested. Like, I've always been somebody that gets a little bit antsy and a little itchy. And so I started thinking about when things kind of settled. And I guess this was about 3 years ago. And my daughter was a little bit older, and I felt like, I want to do something different. And so I started doing parent coaching on the side. And it was really taking my clinical experience and thinking about reaching more people. And so I was kind of doing that, keeping myself busy. And I met my now co-founder, one of my now co-founders, through a friend who I went to undergrad with this friend in Virginia, and this friend went to business school with my co-founder in California at Stanford, and he was looking for a clinical psychologist to talk about a startup with. And she said, "Hey, why don't you chat with my friend Elizabeth?" And we connected over email and started talking about ideas in the child development space. And it was really exciting for me. And it was sort of like I had been in the same job for quite a bit of time. And it just opened my mind to thinking about other possibilities. And at first, it was just like someone fun to talk to on the other side of the country about child development and thinking about tech and the work that I was doing every day, and if there was an opportunity to make a larger impact and scale what was happening. And so Tom, who's Tom Sayre, who's our CEO and my co-founder, and I met, and he flew to Virginia, and we spent 2 days together just talking about our ideas and our shared interest around child development and some ideas that we had, and particularly an idea that he had in the child development space. And at the end of those 2 days, he said, "Hey, you want to try to do this together?" And you know, it was fun. Everyone always says, like, did it take you a while to think about it? And it didn't. I was like, sure, like, I'm ready for this adventure. Like, let's
You were
do
almost looking
it.
for it. You're like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. And my husband is a small business owner himself. He's a contractor, and he loves being his own boss. He has no desire to work for anybody, and so I think that spirit is really in him. And so he's, you know, was very supportive immediately, and said, you know, I would do it. Like, I certainly can't tell you not to. And so, you
Wow,
know, I
that's
think I'm
awesome.
just like ready to see where this goes. And so yeah, so that was the beginning, and quite a shift from where I was. And then things started to unfold from there. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that was that. So, okay, I have many questions. So, when you guys bounced mutual ideas during that 48-hour period, right? When your co-founder flew over to Virginia, what is your co-founder's name, by the way?
Tom
Tom.
Sayre, and our CTO and third co-founder is Cataline Voss.
Cataline and Tom. So
Yeah.
Tom flew over. Was Cataline part of the team as yet?
So Cataline was not just yet. He was, yeah, he came up shortly after, and they already knew each other. But yeah,
Gotcha.
very quickly after. Yeah.
So Tom flew over, and it was really like a brainstorm session for 48 hours, it seems like.
Uh-huh.
And did you guys basically draw up like the initial idea for Ello, or back then it was just very ambiguous, and you guys still, maybe a month or two after then came up with the
Yeah.
idea?
So our initial idea, and what we went through YC was with a different product, and it was Tom came to me with the idea, but the idea was very similar to the work that I was doing in the parent coaching. So the idea was to provide parent coaching at scale,
Mm.
to utilize technology, and to basically like and take the data that we learn from parent coaching, and help to surface to coaches the best answers around child development for questions parents have around sleep or eating or tantrums, and to make coaches more effective, and basically to give parents the personalized experience of like having someone every step of the way. It was something
Wow.
that I was doing for my friends, and that I realized there was a hole in support for parents. So that was the company that we went through YC with, and started our journey with. And Ella was a pivot later on.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
So, okay. So, what was it, always Ello, or was it a different name
it was
before?
Trestle.
What was it?
Trestle.
Trussell. Okay. So
Uh-huh.
you applied to YC with Trussell, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And that was three co-founders at that time,
Yeah.
because Cataline had come on.
Yes.
What was that like? Did you fly out to Mountain View
I did. Yeah. So that was a wild experience. That was in October. And so
of 2020 or 2019?
so we were winter 20 batch, so it was 2019.
Oh,
Yep.
wow. So hold on. So how I keep so March 20th, March of 2020 is when COVID really hit America. So
Yeah.
were there any implications at that time or no?
Oh, huge. So that was at the end of our batch. It had a huge impact on demo day.
Wow.
But when we applied, nobody knew what COVID was, and it was not on the radar. So we started to put together the application, I guess, in September of 2019. And people always love this fun fact. I didn't really know what YC was. Like, that's how not. I live in DC. I don't
Right,
live
right.
in
On the
Silicon
East
Valley.
Coast.
I'm like a
Yeah.
psychologist. I'm like, okay, we're gonna apply to this thing. Like, sounds cool. And my co-founder was like, it's very competitive, but it's a wonderful exercise for us to go through together as a founding team. The application process is a good exercise. And it really was. Like, the application asks, really, now being in this and doing this now for the last 2 years, the questions that they ask are the really important ones about
Absolutely.
who your competitors are, and it helps us and really understanding your product, and thinking about being flexible, and thinking of your unit of your co-founding team, and how, what your strengths are. And so Tom kind of said, I think this would be a good exercise for us, like no matter what happens. And so we did the application together, and it was great because it really helped us get some clarity around our product and our vision and our mission and our goals. And I remember it was close to the deadline when we would hear, because they did it a little bit differently, where there was like a certain day where you would know if you got an interview or not. And I had gone to New York to see my sister-in-law, and I was on the train. I'm like, oh, we're going to find out about, YC. And I remember Tom being like, well, Elizabeth, it's really like, I don't know if we're going to get an interview. Like, don't get too
Don't
worried
get too
about
excited,
it.
right?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I feel really good about it, And he was like, okay. And then sure enough, I think it was like at midnight. It was late. Maybe it was even midnight
Did they give you a
California
call?
time.
Because I've heard they give
It was
everyone
an
a call if
email.
you're going to get, oh, it was
It
an
was an
email.
email for the interview, saying
Okay.
like, we'd like to invite you for the interview. So yeah, that was really exciting. And I flew out. The interview was on Halloween, which I had my first dose of like mom founder guilt, because I was leaving my daughter on Halloween, and she was a unicorn that year, and I left like the makeup with my husband. I'm like, this is how she wants her makeup
Your
done.
husband
I
had to
got
do
a
the
place.
makeup?
Yeah, I had to do had to do the unicorn makeup.
That's awesome.
And I flew out to California, and I was there for 2 days, and we spent some time thinking through potential interview questions and things like that, and spending time with Catalina in person. That was like the first time we had met in person. Was before, and Tom and Catalina have known each other for years. They actually did had another company together. And so it was great, and we had a great time. And yeah, and then we had our interview, and we found out that day that we were in the program.
Walk me through what the interview was like. Was it one person, like a YC partner interviewing you, or was it an entire, like, not research panel, but was it a panel of YC partners that were like grilling you guys? Like, are you guys going to be a good fit? Like, what was it like?
For us, it was a panel. It was on campus, like at the Mountain View campus. I think I'm trying to like put myself back in the room. I think there was 5 people. And they were sort of sitting on the other side of this long table, and the 3 of us were on this side, and we came in, and they were friendly. Like, I was very nervous. I was not sure what to expect.
I would be too.
You
Yeah.
had sort of heard, once I realized that this was real, I started really started Googling everything I could find about YC, and like reading books and hearing, and I was like, oh, wow, it's really intense. Like, I think part of like being naive to it was a little bit protective initially, because I'm like, yeah, sure, we're going to like apply.
Worked in your favor. Yeah.
But then I got myself really worked up and thinking like, wow, this is kind of wild how I ended up here, and who would have thought, particularly at this stage of my life, and being at that time it was, so I was 37 years old, and kind of solid in my career at that time, and thinking, here I am. And it was really interesting for me because I had worked in my career for so long, and I had my PH.D, and I had a very particular area of expertise, and I was a subject matter expert on our team. Like, that is my role. But of course, when you're a founder, your hand is in everything. And so I knew nothing. I don't have a business background. I don't have a background in terms of, in even tech. And a lot of the questions around scaling and business and competitors and thinking about it from a founder perspective, that's all new to me. And so it was sort of getting this crash course, and really it was uncomfortable because I was so used to being in a place where I was the expert in the room, and I knew everything that I needed to know.
It's a big learning curve.
I have my PhD, and I'm so comfortable now with 15 years experience working in my field to then really have that shake up. And it's one of the things that I'm so grateful to this experience for, because I get to still learn and have these new experiences. But I was very nervous because all of the questions on, that all the practice questions that we had, were things that new things that I had never thought about and very, very different than my area of expertise. And so, um, but I'm lucky. My two co-founders are incredible people and extremely supportive. And they were like, you do know this. Like, you understand your mom, like, you understand our target audience. Your friends are our target audience. You know kids, like, you're going to
Yeah.
understand our product. Like, you can answer these questions better than we can. Yes, we're using some terms you might not know, but you do know these answers. And it's just a different way to think about what you already know, and you're so aware of the problem that we're trying to tackle because it is, has been what you've spent your career doing. But it was a little bit of like brain gymnastics to think about it in this other way. But I would say the partners were friendly. I mean, um I think the questions they asked were really good, but it wasn't, I
What was
had thought.
the toughest question that they asked?
What was the toughest?
By the way, yeah, I see what your co-founder is saying. You're definitely the spokesman for the end consumer. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I'm like, yeah, it makes complete sense. Like, who better if you guys were to do customer discovery interviews and say you had to iterate your product and understand what feature set to develop next? Who better to be the spokesman for the consumer and to meet with them, right? Than you. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know
Um,
I diverged you from my question, but yeah, I'm curious. What question like
Good
kind of
question.
put you on your heels a little bit? You're like, whoa, didn't expect to be asked that.
I wouldn't say, I mean, we were really being, and I think this speaks to the fact being a co-founding team where there's three of us, and really being balanced in our areas of strength. Cataline is his superpower, and his ability in the technical space is astounding. And his experience with AI and building products, even in the child development space, utilizing tech, he's very, very strong. He was getting his PhD at Stanford, and really just a really deep knowledge. And so he was able to field the technical questions. Tom has his background in business. They had gone through a startup together. So a lot of those questions they were able to field. And we kind of thought about it like, Tom's going to answer the business questions. Cataline's going to answer the technical questions. I'm going to answer the product questions. And so for me, they were good questions, like questions that I think even in my work with parents before we went into this interview, had thought about things like, what would stop somebody from utilizing your product? And for me as a psychologist, I have thought so much about like what stops people from utilizing something that's going to help them, what motivates people to engage in a process that's going to help them or their child, how do people make decisions? Like, a lot of the questions around consumer behavior and how people engage with a product are things that I already spent a lot of time thinking about in my work with parents, but in a slightly different way. And so, I think the question I liked best was, because I think it's complicated and it's ultimately the biggest learning we had from our experience with Trestle was, and I think it's interesting that they had their finger on this, like even before, even all the way back at the interview time, was them asking what might stop a parent from using Trestle, which was
Mm,
our parent coaching service that we were pitching to
yeah,
YC. And I think that was ultimately what we thought a lot about during YC as we were trying to hit that product market
the
fit.
potential objections, right, and competitors. Yeah, and you know, now I'm starting to understand kind of how they format it because it's a 3-month process, right? And so 90 days. And I wonder if it's clearly broken up. First 30 days is, phase one. Is it solely about, addressing objections, potential objections to your potential customer signing up? And then part two is maybe going out and speaking to them. How was that formatted? What were the first 30 days like?
Oh my gosh. I wouldn't say that it was an ease in like that. At least
They
from
just threw you
my
in.
vantage point, it did not feel like that. It felt like launch, like you should have launched yesterday.
Yep. I've
And
heard that. Yeah.
like you need to be talking to people day one, like you should already be talking to people. And we had talked to a ton of parents before our interview, and they wanted to know during our interview like what we learned from parents and how. And I think from my perspective, if I had to sort of analyze what it felt like, is that they're trying to understand like our process, our discovery. Are we willing to like go talk to 100 parents, and then what are we doing with that information? And I think one of the biggest advantages of YC that we still talk about as a founding team was the push. Like you're going to go to your meetings every week. You set goals that are absolutely bananas, and they're like, did you meet the goal or not? Why didn't you meet the goal? And the iteration and the speed with which things are happening is incredibly fast, because your goal for demo day is usually very, very ambitious, and they're constantly pushing you to launch and go and talk to people, and
How was
start
that,
getting traction.
from a shift in your previous life of, working in the educational space to going into very ambiguous, very, not that the education space isn't ambitious, but I mean, like, it seems like they just pushed you on like almost a made up curriculum, right? Like it's not as clear as like a classroom,
Yeah.
but they're like, hey, you're going to launch by demo day and do all these things. And you ended up, did you have a pivot to LO mid YC or after YC, by the way?
After YC. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you launched, what was the first name?
Trestle.
Trestle. Was it in the second month of YC or for demo day you guys launched?
We were launched when we had a beta running when we applied. So we had a soft launch, and so we officially launched Bookface, and opened it up to YC parents, and pretty quickly.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what was, so that you went from soft launch to, would you say alpha launch, or well, it was beta launch already. So official launch,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
By when was that? Month 2, month 3, or exactly on demo?
Within month 1.
Within month 1.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did it go from month 1 to months 2 and 3? Like, did you guys, the hockey stick growth that everyone seeks to achieve, or?
we learned a lot. We definitely had growth. It wasn't, I don't think we ever hit product market fit. We had a group of parents, and we had people that used our product that loved it. Like we had the people that would evangelize our service and really, really loved it. We didn't have, virality. And I think a lot of that has to do with hesitancy around the service. I think it's not something that people, unfortunately, because there's still so much stigma around mental health, I think it's not something that people might say to their friends, like, oh, hey, I tried this service, even though
Word of
I'm
mouth was
very
kind of tough,
comfortable with it.
right?
And then I think, I do think the pandemic had an interesting impact. The thought, and I've talked to other people that are in the parenting space, we kind of thought, wow, this could go a couple different ways. And some people thought, wow, the pandemic, like parents are so stressed, their kids are home from school, schools are closed, like you guys are going to be so busy. And I spent 2 weeks and I talked to about 100 parents in 2 weeks during the pandemic.
In 2 weeks. Wow.
This was like after we launched.
How'd you find them? They were all current users, or did you like go
No.
to parent teacher groups?
I
Facebook?
mean, I Facebook groups of moms, and just said like, hey, is anybody willing to talk to me? I'm in a couple moms groups of women who are also entrepreneurs, and just reached out to my networks and said like, can I talk to you?
That's awesome. Yeah.
And kind of trying to understand what parents were going through during the pandemic. So this was early April, mid-April maybe. And
oh, wow.
so this was after we had raised our round, and And I talked to parents because there was this huge shift, I think, for parents in the pandemic. And parents were kind of like, I need so much help right now, but the space of like talking to a coach, texting with somebody, like I don't have time. Like I'm just trying to get through the day. Like we're in crisis right now. And what I need is something that's going to feel like a lift, that's going to help take things off my plate rather than, in some ways, Trussell is asking parents to do work. Engaging in coaching or, being a psychologist, knowing this from therapy, it's work. And so that's interesting if your product is asking somebody to do something, it's different than like, I'm going to sign up for a subscription service for my child that's going to give them, this wonderful experience. That's not a heavy lift for the parents. Our product was still a lift for the parents. The pain point was real. The need is real, but the solution is hard. And so I think that was the biggest learning, I think, for us, was that it's tough for parents to overcome that, particularly during the pandemic. And so we started looking at other big issues that we really were passionate about in the child development space. And that's where Ella came from.
I mean, that's incredible, because you just really demonstrated and you epitomized the power of customer development interviews or customer discovery interviews. Like, meet with the people that you're building this product for, and they'll tell you what to build, right? And they'll tell you their pain points. That's what you really did. You did a root cause analysis, right? Like, I understand you're having this trouble now. This requires a lot more of your time and energy to help your child develop, because now they're at home constantly, right? You now have to make lunch for them, right? Because they're not getting school lunches. And I'm not a parent, so I'm kind of just guessing all the other things you have to do. But and they really told you, like, hey, maybe did they like really like spell it out for you in terms of like what you would want to build with Ello, or you guys took those user research data points and turned them into product development insights?
Yeah, it's funny because we think a lot about, and we were always talking to people, even when we were in the throes of Trussell, we were talking to parents about what they needed and what they wanted, and it wasn't so direct. Like, it was actually a little bit confusing because we would talk to people and they would, parents kvetch and talk about the difficulty of being a parent all the time. Like, if you ever become a parent, you're ever on a parent Facebook group, or parents like that, it is a lot of like, this is so hard, I need help. The pain point is right there. I mean, it is so clear. And it's interesting, though, finding the solution that parents want for that pain point is a little more difficult. And so I think it wasn't so clear in the user interviews, because we would talk to parents and they would say, like, yes, this is what I need. I need somebody that will tell me like what I'm supposed to do with tantrums and what I'm supposed to do with sleep. And then we would see there would be a stall in signing up. There would be all this enthusiasm around the idea, but then there would be a stall in signing up, or there would be, even more interesting, like they would subscribe, but there would be like this period of time before they would like schedule their initial call with their coach. And they would pay for it and then like put off scheduling the call. And so it took a lot of like really having to peel back the layers of the onion, because parents would say things like, oh, well, maybe it's the cost, or like, oh, I just wasn't sure. But because I think there's vulnerability to the product we were building. And when you really kind of peeled it back, it was parents saying like, I know that I need this help, but I'm exhausted. And like this solution is touching on a vulnerability and it's feeling really hard for me, particularly in this moment. And, then you're not going to give me, it's not like, Huckleberry is an app that measures child sleep and then sort of sends parents messages like, this should be their time you wake them up, and here's some tips. Ours was much more intense of like, text your coach about your particular child. They're going to give you a plan. Then you have to do the plan. And I think for parents, it was like, oh, then I have to, oh, somebody's going to hold me accountable. And we ran into, I talked to people in the fitness space. I talked to people in the weight loss space. And a lot of startups in that space have similar challenges
Yeah,
because I think there's some
absolutely.
resistance.
Yeah, I used to be in the fitness space as well, and part of my core target demographic were people with medical conditions and people who had kids and they were really busy, right? And
Yeah.
there were whether they were working moms or working dads, they would always really hold themselves accountable and feel guilty about lack of being there or
Yeah.
lack of being able to take care of or do certain things like the finer
Yeah.
nuances of parenting, like reading a story to their kid at night. It was a good day if they were able to do that, but
Yeah.
sometimes they were too busy to even do that. So, like, oddly enough, I can understand, where your customers were coming from,
Yeah.
and the way that you navigated that space, and I don't want to ruin the surprise because you're gonna, talk about Ello a little bit more and how you guys pivoted, and that ultimately is like that's entrepreneurship right there. Like, hey, we realized we weren't really hitting the mark, but here's what we did. We talked to our customers and we navigated the pivot perfectly. And that's why I really want you to talk about now. How did you guys,
Yeah.
do that?
Yeah. So, I think the overlap for the three of us, the space that all three of us have sort of passion in and interest in is really in the child development space. Tom also has a teaching degree and has a background in education, and before he went to business school, and he's very passionate and about that space. Cataline has developed something called Autism Glass for children with autism that utilize technology in that space. And so we knew that the impact we wanted to make, whether it was Trestle, and we started with working with parents, or it was a different product, we knew we were going to live in sort of the child development space. And in many ways, our mission was always individualized education, thinking about kids as individuals. And, our first thought was like, let's start that when they're babies. Like, let's start talking to parents about different temperament with their children and how that can look when you're managing tantrums or sleep. But, the vision was always larger in terms of thinking about then what that means as children go on their course of development. And we knew that Trestle could go in many directions. And so when we thought about our customers, who when you're in the child development space, your customers are really parents too. You try to have two customers. You have the kids, but you also have the parents. We thought a lot about what are parents telling us they need, particularly in this really unusual time in history. And we were in having a daughter who was in kindergarten in the pandemic and home with me, and I'm trying to run a business and fundraise and also homeschooling her and getting her on Zoom classes, and she's 5 and she's trying to learn to read. I mean, it was insane. And so I knew firsthand how hard this was. And it was very interesting seeing this with my daughter, because in kindergarten is when kids learn to read, and the challenges of her teachers, who are phenomenal, doing their best over Zoom, but it really being difficult. And the way technology played in, and the teacher saying like, oh, well, download this app for your child, or download this app for your child, and parents in the interviews we were doing around Trestle leaning really heavy on tech around education. And then we really started thinking about that. And we also started thinking about the disparity in education that the pandemic was causing. Kids who just weren't even able to log on to Zoom, who didn't have access to technology. And we thought then, like, how do we bring in tech? How do we think about making this a really highly technical product? And where are the spaces in tech that there have been really recent advances that we can leverage? And we talked about speech recognition technology and advances there. And I said, if we can nail speech recognition technology, one of the strongest applications, as we were thinking about the applications as a team, is reading. And it was very interesting watching my daughter on several apps. It's very passive. It's click on the word cat or drag the letters here. But that's not how kids learn to read. how kids learn to read is by reading out loud, and you need a person there to hear that. Like that's the crutch of reading acquisition. And pandemic has amplified the disparities, but we have low literacy rates in our country. We have kids who don't have books in their homes, and could technology be an equalizer in that way, which was also something that helped us be really mission driven. And that's kind of how Ella was born. We thought, let's apply this speech recognition technology to make a product that will help early readers with literacy acquisition, and can do something that kids need right now, and give them really valuable screen time, and give them feedback, and kind of in some ways support parents in many ways who I had so many of my friends saying, like, I have to teach my 6-year-olds how to read at home. Like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to help them when they're stuck on a word. And so, so that's where the idea came from. And we're really excited about the impact it could have.
That's fantastic. I mean, I'm not familiar with the space. Are there any competitors right now that do something similar, or are you guys the first market? Because I mean, this sounds fantastic. Like, I've never heard of an NLP, like reading coach, essentially. Or
Yeah.
I like the way you said it, reading acquisition, like really learning how to pronunciate different words, pronunciate sentences. But, are you guys really like the first of your kind? It sounds like.
So the idea of using speech recognition for reading has been around. There are some other companies. There's a company in Ireland that is called Soapbox Labs that is focused on the technology of speech recognition for kids, because speech recognition for kids is kind of a bit of a different animal than speech recognition for adults, because child speech is very different than adult speech from a technical perspective. And there are other companies in the space that have thought about how to apply it for reading, but it's still pretty new. There is a company called Amira that is focused on selling to schools, and they use speech recognition for reading, but it's a bit for older kids. We really wanted to design a product that was for the youngest kids. And what is our differentiator is that we're using real books rather than having kids read from screens. And so, we are using high quality books, and we're basically, helping say to a parent, these are the perfect books for your child at their reading level. We're going to, mail the books, to your home. The kids, get this awesome box in the mail, and it's going to be filled with these books.
Oh, wow. So it's a subscription box as well.
Yeah. So the box is going to come to the house. Ello's on the box. Inside the box is going to be books that are like perfectly leveled for your child. And then your child's going to read to Ello from the physical book. And Ello will, kind of almost in some ways do what a reading specialist would do in a classroom, or a parent would do in a classroom, where they listen to the child and say, the child gets to the end of the page and they say, let's go back and look at some of those words. Or if the child is stuck, they can tap on Ello, and Ello can say, okay, here's the text, pulls the text here up, here's the word you're stuck on, let's break it apart. And we've worked with reading specialists to develop the coaching that happens for the kids so that it can mimic what a reading specialist would do. But we really, I think where we're different is we spent a lot of time thinking about how to make this fun and how to make this something that kids would want to do. And so very, very early, like before, we had everything nailed down, I was going out and play testing with kids, outside in my mask, in the winter, saying to my friends who have kids that are learning to read, like, I want them to look at this app and tell me what they think. And do they like Ello? And do they like the color he is and how he looks? And, do you want stars, and how much celebration, and what should we have Ello say? And like really thinking about the kids as the customers too, and developing something that's fun and motivating for the kids to keep them engaged.
Yeah, and the more I thought about that, I was like, I remember when I was a kid for reading camps, or sorry, summer camps, there would always be like a scheduled reading hour. I'm a big reader as well, by the way. I love reading. As a kid, I didn't like it, but obviously it's something
Yeah.
that's very valuable. But I wonder if eventually, you would have an enterprise solution, right? Like as business minded as that sounds, it's more so like you would actually sell direct to schools or, summer camps, like the YC, not the Y
The
Combinator, but the
YMCA.
YMCA.
Yeah.
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 I keep thinking of the YC, but yeah, I wonder if there's a use case for that as well, for like their summer camps or after school camps. They can have an hour of Ello.
Yeah.
Has a good ring to it.
Yeah, exactly. We've been really encouraged by the feedback that we've gotten from teachers and from professionals. I joined a lot of Facebook groups around like the science of reading and teachers in the reading space, and said, hey, can I talk to the teachers who are doing this work? And what's interesting is a lot of them said this would be valuable in the classroom, absolutely. And then also what happens at home is the part of the learning experience that they can't control. And they know, to our point we were talking about earlier, how busy parents are, how stressful it can be, how hard it can be for parents are fighting with their kids around reading. And so, they were very enthusiastic, which is high praise and meaningful praise when you have people that are doing this work in the field, and say that they feel like it's a meaningful product for kids.
Yeah, that's incredible. Wow. And we have to wrap up here, but I want you to let the audience know, when do you guys launch? Because I believe right now is it early access or
Yeah, we have parents can get early access. So if you have a child that's in the early stages of reading, anywhere from 3 to 8, and parents are interested in giving Ello a try, we are having a closed beta, and parents can go to helloello.com and our aunts and uncles and sign up and get information on how they can get Ello in the hands of kids who are loving it. So yeah.
awesome. And if there's any parents out there that are looking to stay in touch as well as navigating to the site, are you reachable on LinkedIn? Obviously, don't
Yeah.
give out like your personal email or anything, but a business email.
Yeah. People can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Elizabeth Adams there, or they can email me at elizabeth@helloello.com.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. It's been a complete honor. I should be calling you Dr. Adams, correct?
Oh, I mean, you can, but Elizabeth is perfectly fine.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor, Elizabeth. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.